The soft glow of wall-mounted accent lights washed over polished marble floors as Beau Hale led me down a long, quiet hallway inside his gated Seattle mansion. His tailored charcoal suit fit sharp against broad shoulders, and exhaustion lingered heavy beneath his calm, billionaire composure. He did not slow his pace, not even when he tossed out the offer that had pulled me through his front door that evening. "If you can get my son to stop crying for 10 full minutes," he said. His voice low and frayed at the edges, "I will give you any amount of money you ask for." I swallowed hard, my canvas work bag digging into one shoulder. My checking account sat nearly empty, stacked high with leftover medical bills from my mother's hospital stay. Every month I scraped by on casual nanny shifts, and this interview had landed in my inbox out of nowhere. I already knew the terrible resume of this baby before I stepped foot inside the estate. 99 nannies had walked out or been driven away. 5 respected pediatric doctors had thrown their hands up with no diagnosis. There was even a high-profile child specialist whose hourly rate dwarfed my entire monthly income, and that expert could not calm him either. 4-month-old Kai Hale screamed day and night, non-stop, and nobody could figure out why. Beau's large hand rested lightly on a nursery door handle. The faint, muffled sound of wailing seeped through the thick wood, high-pitched and endless. He pushed the door open, and the noise rolled out to meet us. Dim warm lamplight filled the spacious room. Expensive designer mobiles hung above the crib, luxury blankets layered across the mattress, every item top of the line, paid for by endless wealth. There in the center lay the small heir, red-faced, tiny fists balled tight, lungs burning as he cried. The moment I stepped close to the crib's edge, something impossible happened. Kai's screaming cut off. Just half a second of dead silence. His wet, dark eyes locked straight onto mine. He tilted his little head, studying me from head to toe, no sound escaping his small open mouth. And then a sharp, furious adult voice exploded directly inside my skull, clear as any spoken word. "Finally. A poor woman." I flinched back, my breath catching in my throat. My eyes darted toward Beau, standing a few feet behind me. He had heard nothing, only watched his son in quiet, stunned hope. The voice belonged to the infant in the crib, no doubt about it. "Poor people actually know how to read labels," the angry mental tone continued, sharp and burning with frustration. "Go tell my father that my formula is poisoned. That woman who walks around drowning in perfume is a chemical weapon. If they keep shoveling this expensive toxic garbage down my throat, I will find a way to call the police myself." My heart hammered in my chest. I stared down at Kai. He had not made a single physical sound, his little body still tense, but that mature, raging consciousness sat trapped inside that tiny baby frame. I glanced across the nursery countertop, where unopened premium formula canisters sat stacked neatly, the exact brand the household used around the clock. Every bottle they fed him came from those tins. Beau stepped forward, hope flickering across his face. He stopped. "You actually quieted him," he murmured, sounding half disbelieving. "No one has done this, not even for 60 seconds. I could not tell him what I had just heard. How would any billionaire react if a brand new nanny claimed his infant son spoke telepathic warnings inside her head? He would write me off as mentally unstable, show me straight to the front gates, and Kai would go back to screaming alone with nobody who understood his desperate message. The weight of my unpaid bills hummed in the back of my mind, but something sharper, something protective, tangled itself around my ribs. This baby was not just colicky. He was begging for help. Before I could think it all through, Beau extended a formal job offer. Live-in position, huge salary, private guest quarters within the mansion compound. I would be Kai's primary caregiver, around the clock. I told him yes. Paperwork got signed quickly in his downstairs study that same night. A household staff member showed me to my guest bedroom deep within the gated property. Tall perimeter walls surrounded the whole estate. The front security gate required staff clearance to open. I had accepted the job, and now I was locked inside. Late hours rolled by. Most of the mansion had fallen quiet. I left my temporary room, intending to check on Kai one more time before I tried to sleep. As I turned the corner onto the nursery wing hallway, my feet slowed. A thick, distinctive floral perfume drifted through the still air, heavy and unmistakable. Somebody had just been here. Somebody wearing exactly the scent the baby had called a chemical weapon. Morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling nursery windows, painting soft gold streaks across the crib sheets. Kai lay awake, small limbs twitching restlessly. His physical cries stayed muted for stretches, but his sharp mental voice hummed constantly inside my head, alert and watchful. I sipped lukewarm coffee from a chipped ceramic mug, my gaze drifting over the neat stack of formula canisters on the changing table. Last night's perfume lingered as a ghost in my memory, every shadow down the hallway making my shoulders tighten. Beau stopped by shortly after 8. Relief softened his features when he saw Kai was not wailing at full volume. He clapped me gently on the shoulder, already talking about performance bonuses, extra cash that could wipe out every last one of my medical debts in a matter of months. I nodded and smiled, keeping my real questions locked tight behind my teeth. I could not mention telepathy. Without tangible proof, I would sound delusional, and Kai would lose the only person who received his warnings. Once Bo left for his corporate office, I set to work quietly investigating. I rotated each formula canister, reading every printed label, checking batch numbers and expiration dates. Outwardly, the packaging looked flawless, high-end retail stock, no obvious dents or tampered seals. Nothing jumped out as obvious poison to the naked eye. Still, I noted each batch code down in the Notes app on my phone, snapping quick timestamped photos before I set them back exactly where I found them. I did not want anyone to notice I had been digging through supplies, down in the mansion's storage pantry. I crossed paths with Rosa, a middle-aged housekeeper who had worked for the Hale family for 3 years. While restocking nursery linens, I carefully asked what had happened to all the previous nannies. She folded a cotton blanket slow and deliberate, her eyes darting toward the closed pantry door before she lowered her voice. Most had not quit by choice. Many had been pushed out over small, trivial-sounding complaints. One got accused of mishandling baby gear. Another was said to have attitude issues toward Elena. The name hung heavy in the air. Elena Voss. The perfumed woman, Ms. Voss, runs so much of this house alongside the company, Rosa murmured, her tone cautious. Mr. Hale trusts her completely. Whatever she says carries weight. My stomach turned over. I thanked her and slipped back toward the nursery. I stepped outside onto the small attached balcony and dialed Marnie, my best friend who worked emergency nurse shifts across the city. The phone connected, and I kept my voice low, careful of hidden microphones or passing staff. I told her about the strange job, the endless screaming baby, the odd atmosphere inside the gated estate. I left out the telepathy. Even to her, that detail sounded too wild. I only told her I suspected something was wrong with Kai's supplies. Marnie's practical tone cut straight through my vague unease. Lila, that place feels rotten. Rich people's mansions with high walls always hide secrets. If your gut screams danger, walk away. You don't have to risk yourself just to pay bills. I stared back through the balcony glass at Kai, kicking his legs inside the crib. I thought of my stacked medical statements, of the cramped studio apartment I could barely afford. Walking away would mean safety for me, but who would listen to Kai? I told Marnie I would stay a little longer, that I needed to gather real evidence first. She sighed, clearly frustrated, but promised she would stand by me. By mid-afternoon, Elena Voss appeared in the nursery doorway. Tall, polished, sharp-shouldered, dressed in a tailored business blazer. That heavy floral perfume rolled into the room ahead of her, thick enough to make my nose prickle. She offered me a smooth, practiced smile, stepping inside like she owned every corner of the space. She cooed down at Kai, reaching over the crib rail to brush a finger against his tiny hand. Kai tensed instantly, his little face twisting, and a wave of furious mental static flooded my mind. Watch her. She is testing. Kai's voice blared inside my skull. Elena made small talk, asking about my background, my work history, how I was adjusting to life inside the mansion. Her questions sounded casual, but everyone probed for weaknesses. She wanted to know how badly I needed this paycheck, whether I had close people outside the gates I talked to regularly. I kept my answers guarded, giving away as little as I safely could. She lingered 20 minutes before gliding back out toward the main wing. As the sun began sinking toward the horizon, Bo returned home from headquarters. I was in the kitchen warming Kai's bottle when he pulled me aside into the formal sitting room. His expression was no longer warm. A printed note sat in his palm, a formal complaint. According to Elena, I had been distracted earlier that day, neglecting to watch Kai closely, putting him at unnecessary risk. There were no witnesses, only her word. Disbelief burned through me. I had not taken my eyes off the baby for more than a minute all day. I tried to explain, but Bo's loyalty leaned hard toward his longtime COO. He did not fire me outright, but the damage was done. My reputation within these walls had already been quietly tarnished. I was now under suspicion. That night, I sat beside Kai's crib long after the household went quiet. The lights dimmed low, and the whole mansion settled into stillness. Then Kai's urgent mental voice exploded inside my head, sharp and urgent. No trace of a baby's softness. She is going to swap a brand new unopened formula canister. Tonight, while everyone sleeps. Darkness draped over the Hale estate, and I kept my bedroom lamp burning on low long after midnight. Kai's warning replayed in my head, looping over and over. Elena planned to swap out a fresh formula canister under cover of night. If I slept through it, there would be no way to prove what she had done. I slipped out of my guest quarters in soft socks, phone clutched in my hand, moving slow along carpeted hallways so my footsteps would not echo. The mansion breathed around me, distant hum of security systems the only steady sound. When I reached the nursery, everything looked untouched at first glance. The stack of formula tins sat neatly on the changing table, dim moonlight glinting off their metallic lids. Kai lay awake in his crib, eyes wide open, no physical sound escaping him. His mental voice hit me the second I stepped across the threshold. Hurry. She could come at any moment. I worked fast but careful. I grabbed one of the brand new unopened canisters, peeled off the outer retail sticker, and scribbled a tiny, almost invisible mark on the metal base with the tip of a safety pin. If Elena swapped it later, I would be able to tell. I snapped time-stamped photos of every batch number, sealed the canister inside a thick Ziploc bag, and tucked it deep inside the bottom of my canvas work bag. This was my sample. If I could get it off the gated property, Marnie might be able to help me find answers. I returned all remaining tins exactly to their original positions, erasing every trace I had touched them. The next morning, I built small safeguards into my daily routine. I logged every bottle Kai drank, wrote down feeding times, and noted whenever new supplies were delivered to the house. Elena kept showing up in the nursery unannounced. She started rearranging my schedule, suggesting extra house staff take over feedings and naps, trying to cut down my one-on-one time with Kai. Every gentle suggestion was a quiet power play. Each time she pushed for more access, I gave ground only in tiny increments, always making sure I stayed present for his formula feedings. By midweek, I spotted my chance to sneak the sample outside. Bo had an all-day board meeting downtown. Most senior staff left the mansion grounds with him. Only housekeeping and security guards remained behind. I told the gate security I needed to run out for personal essentials. The guard checked my identification, scanned my bag quickly, but he did not dig deep into the bottom layers. I drove my beat-up old sedan to a crowded grocery store parking lot 10 minutes away, where Marnie waited for me in her own car. I slid into the passenger seat and handed over the sealed Ziploc bag. Morning sun beat down on the car windows. Marnie turned the canister over in her hands, her nurse's face tight with concern. "I can run some quick informal hospital screen tests," she said, her voice lowered. "But formal, legally valid toxicology work costs real money. We don't have lab budget for that. Preliminary results might flag odd contaminants, but it won't hold up if we end up confronting rich, well-lawyered people." That warning landed heavy in my chest. Even if we found something strange, hard proof would still be out of reach. I thanked her, made her promise to keep the sample locked safely away, and hurried back toward the mansion before anyone grew suspicious about how long I had been gone. And back inside the walls, tension hung thick in every room. Elena must have noticed something was off. That evening, I passed the security control nook near the main entrance. Through the half-open door, I saw her leaning over the security officer's shoulder, scrolling through camera footage from the front gate. Her finger tapped the screen right at the timestamp of my short trip out to meet Marnie. My throat went dry. She knew I had carried something off-property. Later that night, Bo pulled me aside in the library. His expression was troubled. Security logs showed I had left the estate with my work bag, and Elena had brought it directly to his attention. He did not accuse me outright, but his distrust hung plainly in the air. I told him I had only gone out to buy personal toiletries. I could not tell him the real truth. Without lab results, my story sounded like fantasy. He did not push further, but I could see the doubt settle deeper behind his eyes. I returned to the nursery after our conversation. Kai lay in his crib, and I rested my forehead against the cool wooden edge. The risk had multiplied. Elena knew I had moved material outside the mansion. She did not know exactly what it was, but she was hunting for it. If Marnie's tests came back with nothing, everything I had risked would be for nothing. If the tests came back positive, Elena would move fast to destroy me before I could use it. Kai's mental voice rang sharp inside my mind. Worn thin from constant stress, yet still unbroken, she is going through every guest room tonight. She is searching for whatever else I might have hidden. Days dragged by while we waited for Marnie's preliminary lab notes. The mansion moved through its polished, expensive routine, yet every corner hummed with quiet paranoia. Elena kept roaming the halls, her perfume drifting ahead of her like a warning signal. She never openly confronted me about the item I had carried off grounds, but her eyes tracked every movement I made. I stopped leaving the estate unless absolutely necessary, and I kept my phone tucked securely on my person at all times. I still held out foolish hope that Bo could be reasoned with. To my eyes, he was grieving, overworked, misled by his most trusted associate, not a malicious man. If I laid out what I suspected, surely he would see the danger to his own son. I found my opening one evening when Bo sat alone in his oak-paneled study. Sunlight faded into soft amber dusk through tall windows. He rubbed slow circles over his temples, worn down by work and Kai's ongoing distress. I stepped inside, closed the door gently behind me, and tried to speak without mentioning telepathy. I told him the formula batches made me uneasy, that multiple former staff had left under strange circumstances, that Elena seemed to have too much influence over household supplies. I kept my tone calm and factual, sticking only to observable facts. Bo's expression hardened as I talked. He heard complaint, not warning. "Elena has stood beside me through every hardship," he said flatly. "She helped build this company. She cared for my wife while she was sick. You are a new employee, barely 2 weeks in this house. Are you frustrated with your wages? Is this about demanding more pay? His words knocked the breath out of me. Every carefully chosen word seemed to twist in midair. Before I could reply, Elena knocked and entered the study uninvited, as if she had been listening just outside the door. She smiled sadly, sympathetic, painting me as overstressed and overwhelmed by the pressure of caring for Kai. She suggested I might be to blame for this growing sense of unease, that the job's weight was playing tricks on my perception. There was no shouting, no dramatic accusation, only quiet, lethal manipulation. I left the study with my shoulders tight and my hope crumbling away. That night I texted Marnie long paragraphs, venting my frustration. She shot back sharp reminders that I was trapped behind high walls, isolated from most of my outside connections, and that my judgment was becoming clouded by the huge salary hanging over my head. Hours later, her preliminary lab report arrived over encrypted text. Certain chemical contaminants were present in the formula sample. It was not ironclad legal proof, but it confirmed my worst fears. Something dangerous was in those tins. Armed with this partial evidence, I tried once more to hint at the danger to Bo. Again Elena intercepted the conversation, spinning my concerns as greed-fueled paranoia. By the end of the week, Bo handed me a formal written warning. The paper stated I had made unsubstantiated accusations against senior household leadership. One more misstep, and I would be terminated immediately. Trust between Bo and me fractured almost completely. Household staff noticed the shift. They avoided private conversations with me, afraid of drawing Elena's scrutiny. I grew startlingly lonely inside the crowded mansion. Late in the nursery, Kai's mental voice crackled with alarm. He could feel the growing threat even if he could not understand every detail of office politics. She is planting evidence. She will make it look like I tampered with the baby's food. They will throw me out before real proof arrives. Elena moved fast to carry out her frame-up. I arrived in the nursery early the next morning to find small white powder dusted across the rim of an opened formula canister. It looked exactly like something someone might sneak in to poison the baby. My pulse spiked. This was the trap. Security staff could walk in at any minute and catch me standing over the doctored supplies. I forced myself not to panic. I pulled out my phone, shooting rapid, time-stamped photos from every angle before I touched a single thing. I did not wipe the powder away. Instead I stepped back and called Rosa, the housekeeper I had spoken with weeks before, asking her to come witness the strange mess with her own eyes. Rosa appeared moments later. Her face paled when she saw the powder residue. She knew what the setup meant. If I had been alone when this was discovered, my career and credibility would have been destroyed instantly. With a neutral third-party witness present, Elena's manufactured piece of evidence lost most of its bite. When Bo and Elena showed up shortly afterward, Rosa stated plainly she had been summoned by me to observe the suspicious condition. Elena's practiced smile flickered for just a split second. She had not counted on me bringing a witness. The frame-up failed, but it drove home how far she was willing to go. After the confrontation, I dug through old household files stored in a dusty back storage closet. I was searching for anything that could explain why she hated Kai so deeply. Stacked among old billing records and renovation receipts were digital printouts of emails sent by Bo's late wife, Clara Hale, in the months right before she died. She had raised repeated safety flags about infant product lines from Hale Consumer Goods. She worried about untested additives. She pushed for third-party independent testing. And over, Elena had written replies dismissing her concerns, calling her anxieties postpartum stress. My skin prickled as I read line after line. Clara's worries had been brushed aside, and not long after, she was dead. This was never only about silencing a fussy infant. Elena had been suppressing product safety warnings for years. Kai screamed because he was being fed contaminated goods, and his mother had tried to blow the whistle before her sudden passing. The pieces clicked together into a terrifying pattern. I could see tiny flickers of doubt cross Bo's face as he skimmed those same old emails later that day. He did not openly condemn Elena. Decades of loyalty could not dissolve in one afternoon. But for the first time, he did not automatically take her side. He asked quiet, guarded questions. Elena sensed that subtle shift. She realized I was far harder to eliminate than the nannies and doctors who had come before. I could not be bullied or frightened off easily. From that point onward, she stopped relying only on subtle smear campaigns. She began planning for my complete removal. One evening I stayed late checking Kai's feeds. The rest of the household drifted off to bed. I tried to leave the nursery wing, only to find the heavy steel access door would not unlock. The keypad flashed error messages. Someone had manually overridden the security permissions from another part of the house. I was locked inside the nursery wing, trapped with no easy way out. Panic coiled cold in my stomach as I banged lightly against the solid door. There was no one nearby to hear me. Kai's mental voice rose sharp and tight with fear inside my head. She locked us in. She does not intend for anyone to find us quickly. The nursery wing grew deathly quiet around me, only Kai's soft, restless gurgles breaking the heavy silence. I hammered my palm against the metal access door again, but no footsteps answered. The mansion's main quarters were far down the hall, most staff asleep behind closed bedroom doors. The keypad kept spitting out error codes. Remote security override had stripped my access permissions entirely. Cold dread settled deep in my bones. This was no accidental glitch. Elena had sealed me inside, and there was no telling how long I would stay trapped. I paced back and forth beside the crib while Kai's weary telepathic voice echoed in my mind. He was exhausted, worn down by constant chemical exposure and unending fear. I pulled out my phone, relieved to find cell service still flickering through the thick mansion walls, and dialed Marnie. My hands shook as I described being locked away behind security-controlled doors. Marnie's voice sharpened with terror. She could not drive onto the gated compound. Security would turn her away without pre-approved visitor clearance. She begged me to run the second I got free. She reminded me I could walk away from all this money, that my life mattered more than exposing corporate secrets. Her words cut deep. I thought about the mountain of medical debt hanging over my head, the huge salary that could erase every bill overnight. A selfish part of me clung to that promise of financial rescue. For weeks, that pay had been one major reason I had stayed, ignoring red flag after red flag. What if I stayed blinded by greed, and ended up erased just like every other inconvenient person inside this estate? That quiet temptation terrified me most of all. It took nearly 2 hours before the door clicked open. A night security guard appeared, confused, saying the system had suffered some unexplained technical fault. I stepped out into the hallway, my legs wobbly, knowing full well it had been no system failure. The guard had no orders to question senior management, and there was zero proof to pin the lock-in on Elena. The next morning, Marnie's full formal toxicology report landed in my encrypted messages. The lab confirmed measurable dangerous contaminants within the formula sample. This was real, tangible harm, not just paranoia. Even so, it was still only one sample, and Elena's legal team could easily discredit its origin if I brought it forward without more supporting evidence. Beau remained stubbornly divided. The old emails from his late wife planted tiny seeds of doubt, yet decades of trust for Elena still held him back. He read over the lab summary I cautiously shared, but he hesitated to act. He told me one sample was not enough to ruin a longtime associate's life and destroy his company's public reputation. Our trust crumbled to almost nothing. Marnie kept texting desperate pleas for me to abandon the mansion. That night, I lingered outside Elena's closed office door. Her voice carried through the thin wood, low over a private phone call. I held my breath and stood very still in the shadow of the corridor, listening. She spoke of an unstable nanny who posed a nuisance, discussing how to make the problem disappear without drawing police attention. No shouting, no overt threats, just cold, calculated planning. I slipped away back toward my guest room, my heart hammering hard in my chest. The danger was no longer hypothetical. Elena was actively plotting to get rid of me. Fear burned away my foolish fantasies about easy wealth. From this point forward, paying off my debts became secondary. My only goals were protecting Kai and gathering enough layered evidence to take Elena down, without getting myself destroyed in the process. Open confrontation had failed before. I would stop arguing out loud. I would build my case quietly, beneath Elena's notice. Every day inside the mansion, I built records. I took time-stamped photos of formula deliveries, supply storage, and every small suspicious detail. I wrote detailed daily notes in a password-protected phone file. I reached out anonymously over social media to former Hale household staff and ex-company employees who had left in recent years. Most ignored my messages, terrified of corporate retaliation. But one former administrative assistant replied, willing to share anonymous testimony. She described how Elena had repeatedly pushed to skip safety testing for infant product lines, cutting corners to boost quarterly profit numbers. I kept up my normal nanny routine to maintain appearances. I laughed at small talk, obeyed household schedules, and never reacted with anger when Elena drifted into the nursery. I planted subtle misdirection. I let her overhear me complaining about how I still lacked hard proof, making her believe I had nothing beyond that single lab sample. I wanted her to grow overconfident, to underestimate how much I had collected. Whenever I left the gated grounds for brief errands, I copied all my photos, notes and witness statements onto encrypted cloud storage, and sent duplicate backup files to Marnie's secure personal device. I also printed physical paper copies, hiding them in multiple separate obscure spots inside the mansion, tucked behind old books in the library, taped to the back of a bathroom cabinet, slipped inside the lining of my own work bag. If Elena seized my phone or searched my guest room, she could not wipe every piece of evidence in one sweep. Elena still tried to chip away at my access to Kai. She suggested rotating additional temporary nannies to share care duties. I compromised on small, harmless shifts, but I insisted I must handle every formula feeding personally. I refused to cede that critical ground. Several housekeeping staff members began to watch Elena with quiet suspicion after witnessing her manipulative patterns. They dared not speak openly against her, but they started passing me small pieces of information in hushed, quick moments. They told me when Elena ordered new supply shipments, when she wandered through the nursery after hours. Slowly, I gained quiet eyes and ears around the house, but this secret support came with huge risk. If Elena uncovered these quiet alliances, those staff members would lose their jobs instantly. One evening near midnight, my phone buzzed with a short warning text relayed from a sympathetic maid. Elena wanted to meet with me alone in the empty grand dining hall, after everyone else had retired for the night. No witnesses would be present in that large, echoing room. I slipped a tiny audio recording device into the inner pocket of my sweater before I walked toward the dining hall. I knew this meeting would be make or break. The grand dining hall stretched long and shadowed, lit only by a handful of dim wall sconces. Marble floors echoed softly under my shoes. Expensive empty dining chairs lined the huge wooden table. Elena waited for me at the far end, her sharp silhouette framed against tall dark windows overlooking the mansion grounds. Her heavy floral perfume hung thick in the cold still air. She had dismissed every household helper from this wing. We were completely alone. She did not waste time on polite small talk. She slid a thick bank check across the polished table toward me. The figure written across it was enormous, more money than I had earned across multiple years of nanny work. "Walk away," she said flatly, her voice low and unyielding. "Cash this check, settle all your debts, and never set foot on this property again. Forget everything you think you know. You can build a nice quiet life somewhere far away." I stared down at the check, at all my financial troubles printed out on paper. It would erase every single medical bill in one stroke. But I thought of Kai, trapped in the nursery, and I pushed the check back across the table toward her. "I am not leaving that baby," I told her. Her polite mask fell away in that instant. Her tone turned cold and threatening. She described Hale Consumer Goods' army of corporate lawyers and PR specialists. If I chose to fight, they would drag my reputation through mud. They would paint me as a greedy, unstable former employee chasing a sensational lie. No one would believe my word against the company's power. I kept my face neutral while the hidden recorder in my pocket captured every word. I asked sharp questions, drawing her into admitting she knew about safety defects in infant product lines. She caught herself before she said too much, snapping our conversation short. She realized she had said more than she intended. I left the dining hall with my heart racing. The recording was powerful ammunition, yet it was not enough on its own to bring down her position. In the days that followed, Beau began connecting fragments of truth on his own. He found his late wife Clara's private personal journal stored inside her old office. Its pages were filled with her growing fears about infant product safety, exactly matching the old emails I had uncovered. For the first time, he could not write these concerns off as postpartum mood struggles. Pieces lined up in his mind. His trust for Elena started to collapse internally, though he kept all his thoughts private. Household staff began quietly picking sides. A few more passed along tips to me, careful to stay unseen. Elena sensed the shift in atmosphere. She understood Beau was slipping out from under her influence. She would not wait for him to turn against her officially. She needed to seize control before the full scandal broke. Late one night, Kai's telepathic voice exploded inside my head, sharp with urgent panic. Elena planned to remove Kai from the mansion the very next day. She intended to use a fake pediatric medical transfer as her cover story. Once she got him off this estate, every advantage would belong to her. Gray early morning light spilled over the mansion rooftops when I woke. I jumped out of bed the instant I remembered Kai's warning. I hurried toward the nursery, and I found Elena already there. She wore a crisp blazer, a baby transport carrier slung over one arm. 2 security guards stood behind her, ready to follow her orders. She intended to walk straight out the front doors with Kai, claiming an urgent doctor's appointment Beau had supposedly authorized. Beau arrived in the nursery doorway moments later. He had received a confusing short message supposedly sent from his own doctor's office, the fake pretext for moving Kai away. Elena moved fast, speaking smoothly, trying to convince him everything was routine medical care. I stepped firmly between her and the crib. This was the final confrontation. I pulled out my phone and began laying everything out. I played snippets from my secret audio recording. I displayed time-stamped photos of formula canisters and batch codes. I showed Beau the full toxicology lab report, the old emails, Clara's personal journal excerpts, and the anonymous witness statements from former employees. I did not mention telepathy. Instead, I explained how small repeated strange behaviors, supply inconsistencies and staff accounts had led me to uncover the scheme. Elena's polished public mask shattered completely. Her calm composure dissolved into anger and desperate denial. She tried to dismiss every piece of evidence as forged fabrications, screaming that I was a vengeful liar. But Beau held Clara's journal in his hands. He had read her unfiltered private fears with his own eyes. He listened to Elena's own threatening voice from the recording device. Every piece stacked against her. Slowly the truth sank in for him. He finally understood why his infant son had screamed endlessly month after month. It had never been unexplained colic. Kai had been reacting to poison mixed into his expensive formula. He realized he had been blinded by decades of loyalty, ignoring his late wife's warnings, endangering his own child. Beau ordered the security guards to block Elena from approaching the crib. He instructed household staff to lock all mansion exits so she could not leave the grounds. He called local law enforcement, turning over every copy of my collected evidence. Elena stood frozen in the middle of the nursery, defeated. All her power, her corporate influence, her carefully built reputation crumbled in that single room. She was escorted off the property by police officers a short time later. The primary threat was gone, yet as I looked around the silent nursery, I felt no rush of triumph. This victory came with heavy weight. Bo was devastated, crushed by guilt over failing both his wife and his infant son. The household was fractured. Even with Elena removed, nothing would simply snap back to perfect normalcy. I stood beside Kai's crib, watching his small face. A quiet question circled in my mind. Now that the danger was gone, should I stay on as his full-time live-in nanny inside this broken wealthy house? Asterisk. Gray early morning light spilled over the mansion rooftops when I woke. I jumped out of bed the instant I remembered Kai's warning. I hurried toward the nursery, and I found Elena already there. She wore a crisp blazer, a baby transport carrier slung over one arm. 2 security guards stood behind her, ready to follow her orders. She intended to walk straight out the front doors with Kai, claiming an urgent doctor's appointment Bo had supposedly authorized. Bo arrived in the nursery doorway moments later. He had received a confusing short message supposedly sent from his own doctor's office, the fake pretext for moving Kai away. Elena moved fast, speaking smoothly, trying to convince him everything was routine medical care. I stepped firmly between her and the crib. This was the final confrontation. I pulled out my phone and began laying everything out. I played snippets from my secret audio recording. I displayed timestamped photos of formula canisters and batch codes. I showed Bo the full toxicology lab report, the old emails, Clara's personal journal excerpts, and the anonymous witness statements from former employees. I did not mention telepathy. Instead, I explained how small repeated strange behaviors, supply inconsistencies and staff accounts had led me to uncover the scheme. Elena's polished public mask shattered completely. Her calm composure dissolved into anger and desperate denial. She tried to dismiss every piece of evidence as forged fabrications, screaming that I was a vengeful liar. But Bo held Clara's journal in his hands. He had read her unfiltered private fears with his own eyes. He listened to Elena's own threatening voice from the recording device. Every piece stacked against her. Slowly the truth sank in for him. He finally understood why his infant son had screamed endlessly month after month. It had never been unexplained colic. Kai had been reacting to poison mixed into his expensive formula. He realized he had been blinded by decades of loyalty, ignoring his late wife's warnings, endangering his own child. Bo ordered the security guards to block Elena from approaching the crib. He instructed household staff to lock all mansion exits so she could not leave the grounds. He called local law enforcement, turning over every copy of my collected evidence. Elena stood frozen in the middle of the nursery, defeated. All her power, her corporate influence, her carefully built reputation crumbled in that single room. She was escorted off the property by police officers a short time later. The primary threat was gone, yet as I looked around the silent nursery, I felt no rush of triumph. This victory came with heavy weight. Bo was devastated, crushed by guilt over failing both his wife and his infant son. The household was fractured. Even with Elena removed, nothing would simply snap back to perfect normalcy. I stood beside Kai's crib, watching his small face. A quiet question circled in my mind. Now that the danger was gone, should I stay on as his full-time live-in nanny inside this broken wealthy house? Asterisk. The autumn rain lashed against Seattle city windows 2 months after I resigned from the Hale estate. My tiny studio felt warmer than it ever had. The stack of medical debts was fully cleared, and I had settled back into regular nanny work for local families. No gated mansions, no hidden threats, no telepathic warnings screaming inside my head most days, anyway. The link to Kai never fully faded. It lay dormant, faint, until something stirred him. I kept my visiting agreement with Bo. Every other Saturday afternoon, I drove out to the property. Security checks remained routine, but the hostility was gone. The nursery had been entirely refurbished. Every old supply chain had been replaced. Every batch of baby food arrived with third-party toxicology reports attached. Bo threw himself into overhauling his company's safety protocols. Public apologies were issued, product recalls rippled across retail chains, and the civil lawsuits piled high against Hale Consumer Goods. Elena waited in county jail awaiting trial, her legal team fighting to reduce the charges against her. She sent no messages, made no attempts to contact anyone inside the mansion. Kai was nearing 9 months old. He babbled, laughed, rolled across his mattress, behaved like any healthy infant to every outside observer. But the second we made eye contact, that adult, clear consciousness reached into my mind. The rage was gone, replaced by childlike curiosity mixed with old residual wariness. One Saturday when I arrived, Bo looked exhausted. Dark circles sat heavy beneath his eyes. He told me Elena's defense attorneys were digging into every detail of the household. They were trying to paint me as an unstable opportunist, building a narrative that my telepath-like observations were fabricated extortion. They had subpoenaed my phone records, my old medical bills, every text message I had exchanged with Marnie. They wanted to paint my desperation for money as motive to manufacture a conspiracy against a high-ranking company executive. My stomach sank. Even though Elena sat behind bars, she could still destroy my reputation from jail. Bo assured me his corporate legal team would stand behind my testimony, yet I could hear the quiet uncertainty in his voice. The defense would twist every part of my past against me. That afternoon in the nursery, Kai sensed my tension immediately. As I sat beside his crib, his mental voice drifted into my thoughts, soft and solemn, far older than his small body. They are trying to make the world believe you lied. I remember everything. I can tell them the truth, but no one will hear my voice but you. I stroked his fine dark hair, my throat tight. There was no way to present our mental bond in a court of law. Judges and jurors would dismiss it as fantasy. All we had were documents, recordings, lab results, and witness statements. Kai's first-hand account would remain locked inside his own head forever. Back in the city that night, Marnie sat on my threadbare couch going over legal paperwork with me. She warned me the cross-examination would be brutal. My history of debt would be thrown in my face again and again. Reporters had already started sniffing around, chasing the sensational story of the billionaire's poisoned heir. Tabloids printed wild theories, none of them close to the real truth. Some speculated I had manipulated household staff for a huge payoff. In the weeks leading up to the preliminary hearing, I slept poorly. Nightmares pulled me back to locked nursery wings, to the heavy cloying scent of Elena's perfume creeping down dim hallways. I kept backing up every piece of evidence to multiple cloud drives, never trusting a single source. Bo reached out several times, offering lawyers to represent me fully. I accepted, but I refused any additional financial gifts beyond what I had already earned. I would not give the defense any opening to claim I had been bought off. On the day of the preliminary hearing, the courtroom hummed with low restless noise. Reporters lined the back rows. Elena sat across the room behind defense counsel, cold eyes fixed directly on me. When I took the witness stand, her attorney hammered at me relentlessly. He brought up my unpaid medical debt, my short-lived live-in position inside the mansion, pushed hard for details about how I had known to suspect the formula. I stuck strictly to tangible facts, timestamps, lab reports, witness statements, recorded audio. I never uttered a single word about hearing a baby's voice inside my skull. That secret stayed safe between Kai and me. By the time I stepped down from the stand, my hands were shaking, but my testimony held firm. The judge ruled there was sufficient evidence for Elena's case to move forward to trial. She would have to answer for her crimes in open court. The following Saturday, I returned once more to the Hale mansion. Rain misted over the sprawling grounds. I found Bo out on the back terrace, staring out over the treeline. He admitted he still carried guilt. He wondered how much suffering could have been avoided if he had listened to his late wife Clara years before. Inside the sunlit nursery, Kai giggled as he batted at a soft toy. When our gazes met, his mental voice came to me, calm and relieved. We held them off. Not with my voice, but with the things you saved. I knelt down beside the crib. I knew our strange connection would change as he grew older. One day, perhaps, this telepathic link might fade completely. But for now, it still existed. I did not need the world to believe in it. It only mattered that we knew the truth. I drove home as dusk fell over Seattle. My life was still quiet and ordinary. I did not possess wealth or status. But I had kept a helpless child safe, and I had protected my own integrity. That was enough.